You will now be asked a question about a familiar topic. After you hear the question, you will have 15 seconds to plan your response and 45 seconds to speak. Do you agree or disagree with the following statement? Video games have a positive impact on children. Provide reasons and examples to support your stance. You have 15 seconds to prepare your response. You may begin preparing now. You now have 45 seconds to speak. You may begin speaking now. Directions. You will now read a short passage and then listen to a conversation on the same topic. You will then be asked a question about the passages. After you hear the question, you will have 30 seconds to prepare your response and 60 seconds to speak. You have 45 seconds to read the passage below. You may begin reading now. Now listen to a conversation about the same topic. Hi, Jenny. You must be pretty pleased to hear about Coach Jepson's new role, right?
Actually, my feelings are completely the opposite. I was really disappointed when I heard the news.
But aren't you on the volleyball team?
Yeah, and that's why I'm upset. We've got a good team, and I thought we could win the championship next year. But now, I'm doubtful. I've looked into Coach Jepson's experience, and she's worked as either a soccer coach or a softball coach for her whole career.
Ah, I see. You worry that she might not know enough about volleyball.
Right! I'm sure she'll learn, but I don't know how quickly. And until she does, I'm concerned she won't have the knowledge required to help the team win more games.
I see your point.
And I think the college doesn't really understand how much Coach Smith supported us off the court.
Coach Smith? You mean the current coach?
Yeah, they mentioned that Coach Jemson's players have an excellent GPA, but so do we. Coach Smith always made time for us after practice if we needed any help in our classes. On top of that, if any of our GPAs dropped below a certain number, we wouldn't be allowed to play. I'm sure Miss Jepson is nice, but so was Coach Smith. I really don't think the team's GPA is that low.
Well, either way, looks like you all have a new coach. Now, answer the question. The woman expresses her opinion about the situation described in the announcement. State her opinion and explain the reason she gives for holding that opinion. You have 30 seconds to prepare your response. You may begin preparing now. You now have 60 seconds to speak. You may begin speaking now. Directions. You will now read a short passage and then listen to a lecture on the same topic. You will then be asked a question about the passages. After you hear the question, you will have 30 seconds to prepare your response and 60 seconds to speak. You have 45 seconds to read the passage below. You may begin reading now. Now listen to a lecture about this topic in a psychology class.
So, as was already mentioned in the reading, the yips is most commonly associated with sports, and some of the best examples come from baseball. Bill Blass was an all star baseball player in the 1960s and early 1970s. In 1973, however, Blass suddenly lost his previous pitching abilities. One day, without warning, he just couldn't pitch the way he used to. You see, in the past, Blass would just pitch. He had a considerable amount of training leading up to the time he became a professional baseball player, which was mainly stored in his unconscious mind. But once he became aware of the complicated motions associated with throwing a baseball, he was no longer able to perform at a high level. His career went to decline, and sadly, he was never able to overcome this problem. But the yips aren't always fatal to an athlete's career. Another baseball player, Steve Sax, started to suffer from a similar deterioration of basic baseball mechanics in the 1983 season. After a single bad throw in a game, Sax began to question his throwing ability, and fear started to cloud his judgment. He committed error after error while throwing to first base. However, Sax worked with a psychologist to help identify the fears which were getting in the way of his performance. It was through Sax's ability to identify his fears and notice them while he played that helped him return to his normal playing form. He played for another 13 years after that, without experiencing the same problems.
Now, answer the question. Using the examples of Bill Blass and Steve Sax from the lecture, describe what the yips is. You have 30 seconds to prepare your response. You may begin preparing now. You now have 60 seconds to speak. You can begin speaking now. Directions. You will now listen to part of a lecture. You'll then be asked a question about it. After you hear the question, you will have 20 seconds to prepare your response and 60 seconds to speak. Now listen to part of a lecture in a history class.
Well, today we are going to talk about the Industrial Revolution. This major shift in the economy caused massive numbers of people to seek work in factories which didn't exist before then. Even though industrialization certainly shaped the society that we all live in and enjoy today, there were some very negative side effects that have also had a lasting impact. To start, cities are densely populated today because of the Industrial Revolution. Before factories sprouted up in cities, people were happy to live in rural areas in tight-knit families within small, local communities. According to some estimates, urban populations increased by up to 40% during the onset of industrialization. The rural landscape was soon abandoned by families that may have lived there for generations. The promise of easy jobs and high wages appealed to younger people who wanted to see more of the world, and even to families who were tired of relying on the weather and a favorable crop season for food. Since then, it has remained increasingly difficult for farms to remain tended and small towns to remain populated. Besides the extensive migration out of the countryside and into heavily populated and increasingly dangerous cities, the Industrial Revolution also marked the beginning of humanity's contribution to the destruction of the Earth's natural environment. Rapidly growing industries not only required an increased amount of labor, but also energy. Coal was burnt, and harmful emissions were let out into the atmosphere with almost no consideration of how these fumes might negatively impact the Earth. Factories even began releasing their waste into reservoirs, rivers, and other natural areas. So, in short, industrialization was the first time we human beings became a major contributor to the contamination of our planet.
Now, answer the question. Using points and examples from the talk, explain 2 effects of the Industrial Revolution. You have 20 seconds to prepare your response. You may begin preparing now. You now have 60 seconds to speak. You may begin speaking now.